What does it take to build a fintech powerhouse, save your users $1 billion, and navigate to a $460 million exit? Today, Zuben Mathews takes us behind the scenes. We cover the highs.
So we had gotten to almost 20 million in ARR.
And the lows.
We made lots of mistakes, so many mistakes in our company.
Zuben also shares lessons he's learned as a founder about controlling your own destiny through profitability.
We're losing money, but I have a dial that I can turn it off anytime I want and start to be profitable at the cost of growth.
Taking massive swings and how to prevent burnout.
The burnout question, it's really hard.
If you're new here, I'm Rex Salisbury, founder of Cambrian Ventures, where I back the next generation of fintech founders at the pre-seed and seed. On this channel, I interview the founders, builders, and investors helping shape the future of financial services. Today, we're unpacking how Zuben built Brigit to tackle one of America's most persistent financial issues around cash flow for millions of Americans, and how he exited that same business for $460 million. But first of all, I just want to say thanks so much for being here. It's really great to have you. The thing I want to talk about here mostly is navigating to exit, something almost every founder has to do and spend a lot of time on, and you just sold your company for $460 million. But let's back up. Remind us your story, the social impact story behind Brigit, and why you even started this company in the first place.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. As I said, thank you so much for having me here. At the end of the day, I'm an immigrant. I came to this country over 20 years ago, and I was fortunate enough to get a full tuition scholarship at the University of Chicago. And I had my single mom who was helping me pay for college. And it was mind-boggling because the genesis of Brigit pretty much started, like I said, in college, where despite me being a full-time student and living and having two jobs, and my mom, as I mentioned, sending me money between her paychecks, I managed to always end up being short between when my money was coming in from my mom and when my expenses were due. That's the classic problem that's 25, well, it's well over 25 years old, but something that I've been feeling for over 20 years. And fast forward to when we started Brigit in late 2017, that fundamental problem of having expenses before your income, even though you're fundamentally living within your means, has continued to exist. And guess what? Whether we like it or not, whether it's payday loans or even your friendly neighborhood bank, be it Chase or Wells Fargo, we're making billions of dollars profiting off of that fundamental mismatch, the timing mismatch between paychecks and expenses. And given my background, having come here and felt that 20 years ago, it ended up going into banking for well over a decade. I wanted to leverage not just the pain points of being a potential customer of Brigit 20 years ago, but also the fact that I worked in investment banking, learned how fintech companies operated long before the phrase fintech even started, but also started to understand how banks operated. Like I ended up spending a lot of time with our chief operating officer at Deutsche Bank, where I worked, was also an investor, and understand the retail banking part of it as well, and say, hey, how do I use my experience from the pain that I suffered and going into using like eating Snickers and vending machines so I could avoid that $30, $25 overdraft? It was still a crazy amount of money for someone from India. It's 1,000 rupees at the time, which again is just insane. To having that experience of saying, this is how companies operate. This is what investors look at when you're trying to fund companies or take companies public or even acquire companies as an investment banker. And as importantly, learn the insights of a bank. And so I got together about 7 years ago. I found the problem saying, hey, I want to use this beautiful, beautiful thing called cash flow information, where you can look into someone's bank account. You can have the income, the volatility of income, historical spending patterns, and borrowing patterns to solve what would be a very, very large pain point for the entire United States and quite frankly, abroad as well. And thanks for interviewing my co-founder, as you talked about several months ago. After I had found that problem, I was able to find him and try to help solve this. And that's how the genesis of Brigit came about. It was very much the combination of my experience of my co-founder in terms of solving problems, but the deep pain point of me being a customer, fortunately, not when I started the company, but back in the day, and the skill sets that I had developed over a decade, a little bit more than that, obviously aging myself here, to help solve a pretty deep problem.
And you crossed 100 million in revenue this summer. 1 million subscribers, although I think you served 8 million customers total. What is that product suite that you built for them to help people understand just what Brigit is today?
Sure. So the genesis of Brigit is that we're still the most downloaded financial health app in the United States. And what that basically means is that we provide a suite of products, in our case for a subscription, where we help individuals budget, get money between paychecks so they don't overdraft, the same core use case that I just talked about. Now build their credit score through savings instead of spending, which is, again, I think quite nifty and a better way to improve your life, as well as a whole bunch of financial literacy tools. All of that is delivered in a suite of products. And some of the things that I'm fundamentally very excited to talk about and proud of is the fact that we've helped our users, according to one of our investors, the Omidyar Group, save our users $1 billion. And that was over about a year ago, $1 billion in fees. That I can live well at night. I mean, obviously there's this thing that you talked about, 100 billion in revenue, which, by the way, we achieved in 2003. So, there's a little bit more than a year ago, as well as profitability.
Yeah.
But the combination, and this is what Hamel and I got together with our teams very focused on, the ability, and I still say that this is the wonderful thing about technology, you have the opportunity to have a social impact while building an enduring business. One that's hopefully of scale, 100 plus million in revenue, as well as being profitable by actually helping people. And that's truly what drives a lot of our team on a daily basis.
And I'm sure it still does. And there's a whole interesting story there, and we unpacked a lot of that story with Hamel. I think the thing I'm excited to dive into here, because there are a lot of founders experiencing this right now, is you have the mission, you build the company, you have success, but then you need to navigate to exit. So maybe we can kick off the story with what your Series A looked like in 2020 when the market was still hot. And then we can start walking down that road to how you ended up selling the business this past year.
So we actually raised our Series A, which was about 25 million in 2019, before when fintech was just starting to get, and when a $25 million round was pretty impressive, if I do say so myself, according to the investors. And we got very lucky. So at that point in time, we'd been into the business. We'd launched the product technically only in 2019 nationally, but we had done some beta before that. But we had gotten to almost 20 million in ARR with a small team of about 12 people. And that's when we kicked off our Series A. This is the fortunate part. It was very lucky. And the fact that the first term sheet we got was at $100 million valuation. And I remember this, and I looked at Hamel, and we couldn't stop smiling. And we tried to keep the best poker face we could. And the gentleman said, "Hey, I don't think you're going to take this. And here's a blank one. Why don't you see what numbers you want to put here?" And that was kind of a surreal moment, because part of this is just being competitive and doing better than what else is out there as a benchmark, as a founder. So that was quite exciting. And by the end of 2 days, God bless San Francisco, relative to New York in 2019 in funding land, we got 10 term sheets. And that kind of kicked off what we thought was going to be a smooth ride to the Series B, whenever that would be. And, as life is, it hits you. By the time February 2020 comes in, March 2020, we get hit with COVID.
Yeah.
At that point in time, you're saying, wow, because everybody talks about lows and highs. We just went through the highest high that I thought I could have gone through as an early founder, 2 years into the company approximately, to the point of being hit, saying, hey, our main product at that point in time was earned wage advances, where we were, in essence, giving money away so we could get it back between paychecks, that same use case that I talked about 20 years ago to avoid overdrafts, among other things. And I remember sitting down and saying, hey, we got to really work through this and manage this, because guess what? We have tens of millions of dollars outstanding. This core cash flow technology has never been tested. It's purely a thesis so far. If we can't bring it back and continue to service these users, remember, high volatility of these users anyway, in an environment that is a black swan event, we're done.
And you have debt capital as well at this point, alongside the equity capital to do that.
We did, but at the same time, like, it's if you don't get the money back, you're in trouble, because you have no more credit facility left, and there's no business at that point in time, because in March, February, there's only one product that we had, which was this. This was our core initial product market fit. And I remember the VCs were panicking. So you got to manage a bunch of VCs. But the first thing I did, and I think this is probably the best, I made lots of mistakes, so many mistakes in our company, but this is one I'm probably personally the most proud of. I got everybody on a call, all virtually. And I said, look, this is where we stand. No one's getting laid off. That's the one thing. If this thing doesn't work out, which it will, we're all going down together. And I think
Yeah.
the confidence that gave, when you had tons of companies obviously laying people off.
Yep.
We didn't even lay off our office managers.
What was your headcount at that time? Because when you did the A, you were 12. You've been
we
pretty...
probably about 20 something,
Yeah.
20 and maybe a little bit, 20, 25, give or take.
Yeah. And so part of the reason is staying disciplined on headcount growth in the first place allowed you to be in the position to have that conversation.
That is true. But at the same time, there's things are happening. Everyone's applying for PPP. We didn't think that was the right thing to do because we were servicing that customer base. So we didn't apply for that because we'd be taking away money from somebody else. And again, to something that I am proud of, and hopefully Hamel is as well, is that, and there's some negatives here as well, but we've never laid anyone off in the history of our company. We've never had a RIF.
Yeah.
And it all stemmed from the fact that we hire clearly not, I don't want to say not fast enough, but very methodically. And subsequently, we have never had to have a RIF. But so the COVID was, again, obviously interesting for a lot of people. We still grew out of COVID. We had the first negative month in, I'm pretty sure it was March, as you would imagine. And look, we were giving away a lot of quote unquote loan forgiveness. Obviously, that's not the right phrase, advance forgiveness, free subscriptions left, right, and center, because it's the right thing to do. Because we realized, and this is one of the tenets of our business, you treat the customer well. You bill for the customer, you automate for the customer. If they value the product and they're having a great experience, they'll stick around. And it was a very nerve-wracking thesis at that point in time, but it worked out. So we still grew a pretty decent amount in 2020, and we were profitable. I mean, obviously the stimulus checks helped us and a whole bunch of fintechs at that point in time for other reasons, including the neobanks. But that was a taste of profitability. And we were like, hey, not that we're not planning on raising because we want to continue to grow effectively, but profitability even at such an early stage is a great part to have on your report card, because you can argue to an investor, to eventually to someone you're exiting, that this is a real business.
You don't get in a bind. You don't get in a situation where your company's growing, you have 2 months of runway, everything looks great, but an investor can jerk you around because they know you have no option. Same with an acquirer. It gives you a lot of strategic advantage in any negotiation. You
own your destiny, right? Being able to, and this is something that I learned early on as an analyst in an investment bank. We did the Salesforce IPO, again, dating myself. But I remember the CFO telling me something which is quite interesting. He said, look, we're losing money, but I have a dial that I can turn it off anytime I want and start to be profitable at the cost of growth. It was not something that they were willing to do at the point in time because, hey, why should you? Because you have, as long as your unit economics is strong. And, you know, it was a very proud moment from a financial standpoint to still have grown 60% in 2020. Again, obviously smaller dollar numbers, maybe at 40 million in ARR, give or take, but being able to be profitable, it was exciting.
Yeah, so quite the roller coaster of great term sheet, great price, competitive round, which is, you know, it's hard not to feel validated. Even if fundraising isn't success, it's hard not to feel validated if you have a lot of interest. COVID hits, wipes things out, but then you build through that. When did you start thinking, because this is now getting into 2020 and 2021 where the funding environment starts taking off. So what does Brigit look like in that funding environment? So
2021 was a fine year. We were not profitable in 2021. And there was obviously a lot of noise going on. And I made the decision of saying, hey, let's continue to focus on building the best company we possibly can. And obviously, there was tons of calls coming in from VCs. And the rationale was, hey, worst case scenario, we'll be bigger next year and we'll raise in 2020. Just trying to be disciplined. And, you know, you can argue this was a mistake from a funding perspective, but trying to be very disciplined through 2021 so we could raise a large round in 2022.
Yeah.
Obviously, fortunately, the business was stronger as we came to 2022, middle of 2022. And if you remember, there's obviously all this Bitcoin hype, et cetera. So CACs were going through the roof. And our goal was still, how do you make the best business? But we missed the funding window.
Yep.
Right? Because the the idea was, hey, we grow 50%, even if the multiples go down 50%, we're fine. So I did not expect the multiples to go down 50%. Clearly, I was wrong on that.
And the multiples went down about 80%.
Yes, that was the fintech. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it was truly the peak and the troughs, and I should have known better, because that's how.
And consumer fintech in particular had the highest multiple expansion, then decompression.
Oh, trust me,
on the way back down.
Yeah. I remember. Like I said, as a finance person, I should remember, but I just didn't calculate for that.
Yeah, and so this is when you really, this 2020 Series A all the way through, the first bit of 2022, you're basically building the business, navigating a volatile environment. But now this is when you have to start thinking about what an exit looks like, I assume, is starting around 2022.
We weren't focused on an exit at that point in time at all.
Yeah.
I'll get to how we got to the exit conversations. It was really more of a partnership conversation. But at 2022, so one thing I didn't mention was, I should have mentioned this earlier, in late 2020, because we had the report card, aka we were profitable, and we were still showing significant growth, and hopefully in a small team, we did an uncapped note at no discount. Mm-hmm. Our lead investor at that point in time, Lightspeed, came to us and say, "Hey, we'd like to add to our holdings," because they didn't get their threshold of 15-20% or whatever it was. Yeah. And they said, "Well, why don't we do a round, or why don't we do a capped note at something?" I was like, "We're profitable. We don't need to do this. So if you want to do this, we'll do an uncapped note at no discount." And they politely told me to go F off.
Somewhere,
yeah, and totally fair. Guess what? We did the round anyway with them and some others, because it was a good opportunity. So that was also...
This is a minor point, but there are lots of opportunities after rounds that are oversubscribed to offer uncapped notes to people. And a decent, that can be a good option for founders. Just know that it exists. Every now and then I tell founders this is a thing that happened, and they're like, their minds explode. And for other people, oh yeah, that's like a thing. So that's a thing. Just remember that. You don't have to do it. A lot of people will say, go something yourself, but it is a thing you can do.
But here's one of the things that I'm sure you advise your portfolio, and what I've learned from some friends and advisors and investors: always ask. So if there's you're not asking me to give the viewers or audience a piece of advice, but if I was going to say something, be humble. Ask, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Someone's going to say no. It's worth it.
It's worth the ask. So that happens. And this is the other thing too, a lot of founders, they aren't looking to exit a business, but you have to start building relationships. And it's those foundational relationships that give you the optionality down the road. So how do you think about building those initial set of relationships to be in a position to then...
Yeah, so that is one of the things I didn't do well. And that's, again, a mistake as a former banker. I was just so razor focused on building the business and trying to build the best possible business. And, as you pointed out in the early part of this conversation, we didn't actually do another round after our Series A. So the good thing was that we controlled the board. So we could have chosen, again, with the ability of having profitability, to go and exit at any point that we wanted. And also management, even at exit, still owned over 50% of the company. So that was again, owning your own destiny was something that was important to me in particular. But as we come back to the story of 2022, this was the crypto winter, the consumer fintech winter, as it were, and CACs were through the roof at that point in time. So trying to run a subscription-based business, which is what we are, LTV CAC is the be-all and end-all of the financial perspective of how we do it. And guess what? We really tightened. I mean, we cut costs as best as we can without laying people off. Try to maximize what was right from a business perspective, increase retention. God bless. Again, you build a product that really matters to people, and if they're willing to pay for it, they'll stick around. Mm-hmm. And then we got back to profitability in October, November 2022, while a number of your consumer fintechs that you're talking about were just bleeding money. And unfortunately, we're getting close to closing up shop. And 2023 was a profitable year. That's when we started to think about a potential exit. And there's a number of things that start to happen there. It was, and this is the thing that some of the VCs don't understand. There's always some personal dynamic, whether it's myself, that was something personal stuff. I lost a couple of family members, but I was still like, hey, I can do this for 10 years. and you start to have some other impact. Like my co-founder, for example, also starting to get a little tired and you want to take a couple of months off. All totally fair. Again, 7 years into it, people don't really understand. And then we got right back at it, saying, screw it. We took a couple of weeks off, etc. And then we started having more and more partnership conversations. So we're about to hopefully announce a B2B partnership, but that's kind of how this conversation started here with Upbound. And that naturally led itself into, hey, there's this massive customer overlap or demographic overlap. They have the ability to give us all these additional resources, whether it's finance, whether it's just capital, and another infrastructure.
And remind people what Upbound's main consumer business lines are.
It is two. One is Rent-A-Center, which is obviously a lease-to-own retail business, been around for almost 50 years. And the other one is Acima, which is a digital version of a lease-to-own. Yeah, right? Very much focused on the median American, median FICO score, as well as median income, which is most of the problems that we solve for as well. Yep. So that was there. And they came to us and said, hey, we want, as you pointed out earlier, is want to be able to build newer and faster products. And we were like, hey, this is all what we want to do. I don't want to get distracted by any of the other things. We love building products. We love growing. And that's always been the core focus of us on a social impact and from revenue. And that's how these conversations happen. There was another partner that we were talking to simultaneously. And it was ironic because they initially kicked off a acquisition conversation. And so these things generally happened in parallel. So that's how it kicked off. In an ideal world, if I were to do it again, I would have had more relationships a year and a half prior to even considering a sale.
Yeah, and that's one thing I often have my portfolio companies do very early is start building those relationships, because it takes 2, 3, 4 years, but 30-minute calls twice a year can go a long way in building those relationships. And it's not about the exit. It's about building relationships with strategic partners. Because as you said, the original conversation with Upbound was not about selling the business. That's a terrible way to have an initial conversation. It's much better to have a generative conversation about what you can do together over the course of many years.
And as you know, most acquisitions, at least the ones that end up working out very effectively, are ones that you've known or people you've known for years, not just months versus a shot. It's like a shotgun wedding. Not that I'm saying it doesn't work. It doesn't. But it's a lot more being able to trust someone and actually ideally physically meet them as well. And in our case, because we were a B2C, we didn't really have too many partnerships at that point in time. So being a partner would have been even better. Our history of partnership would have probably been even better.
Yeah. And I think you're saying in order to be in a good position to navigate to an outcome that aligns with everyone on the team, whether that's an exit via acquisition or any other outcome, one is control your own destiny. Two, maybe build some of these relationships earlier because they can be strategic to the business, even in absence of M&A. Are there other things you feel like you've learned that you would do differently next time?
Purely on the sale? Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we should have done better is, so again, coming back from a finance background initially, the goal's always been under promise, over perform. And in the case of projections, it is good to under promise to a certain degree and over perform. But for example, our EBITDA numbers have outperformed by 15% for our 2024 projections. That's great if you still own the business, et cetera. It's not ideal if you're trying to optimize the price of the business, for example, or even get something
For clarification, that revenue number showed up 4 months, 5 months after you'd already sold the business. So you're like,
it showed up. Well, the EBITDA, beating EBITDA by 15% showed up 2 months after signing the agreement. Let's put it that way. Right? Q4 was just, we had put a lot of work into it. We hoped it would go well. It just truly outperformed.
Yeah. So that's one that, forecasting is always, it's ironic to exceed your revenue target and then be like, but it happens. I think another conversation you and I had is orienting around the right metrics for growing a business. So what do you think are some of the efficiency metrics that matter for founders who want to control their own destiny?
Yeah, it depends on the business. In our case, being a subscription-based business, LTV, true LTV, not just revenue, but actual LTV with all and contribution margins being all variable costs is fundamentally important relative to CAC. Because at that point in time, as long as you have capital, it doesn't really matter if you continue to grow effectively, as long as you know the LTV CAC is positive or 3x or 5x, whatever floats the company's boat, wherever they decide, combined with payback metrics. So that's really important. I'm not really talking about revenue and profitability, that they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
One of the things that I fundamentally focused on in the team, even with our first customer, was revenue per FTE. And the reason for that is we wanted to be able to make sure we build the most scalable business we possibly can. And in order to do that and make sure it's profitable at some point in time and scale as fast as possible, you truly want to be able to automate things. And for me, if you're building true technology, whether it's on the underwriting point or whether it's in customer service, et cetera, that fundamentally to me is a great metric. I mean, you can be as effective, and we were as mature companies, be it even Microsoft, et cetera, from a revenue per FTE basis, you probably have something special going on. And that to me is not just a great metric for running the business, but also for potential acquirers as well.
Yep, absolutely. And for benchmarking for folks, Visa's at about 1.1 million per employee. They're like top of the charts in public markets. They run a network at high margin. Stripe's maybe at like 400K. Where's Brigit today for comparison?
1.5 million per.
1.5, which is great. And it is true. It is a metric. I used to do more growth stage investing, not relevant in the pre-seed with a pre-product, pre-revenue. But it's just a gut check. If someone's telling you this amazing story about automation, and then you're like, oh, I'm a new mortgage broker. And you're like, well, what's your average revenue per employee versus, a normal mortgage broker? And the answer is the same. It downweights the likelihood that there's amazing technology automating a ton of stuff. And so it is a good gut check at scale to always be looking at. Are there other kind of metrics you've oriented around as well in building the business?
I mean, growth is obviously important. But if I was to, I'm not going to stack rank, but just in general, LTV CAC for a subscription business, payback, you get to contribution margin, EBITDA. But again, I do the suite ARR or revenue per FTE. Yeah. Once you get to some level of scale, because otherwise it's a harder metric to judge, is something that helps, as you pointed out, Rex, give you a sense of you're actually building something that has real technology and it's scalable.
Yeah, I'm seeing an increasing number of founders as they get close to Series A get really close to or even at break even. Not with the goal of going into profitability, but I think it's something about just founder discipline and awareness as to this is something you can do, and burning more doesn't necessarily help you grow faster. So one is just cultural, and the two is technological. Like the tools now to build more efficiently using AI, you can do it, and so it's a dial that, that public company or Salesforce, when they go public, they talk about the dial, but even early stage, you can start to think about that dial a little bit.
I mean, every decade you have these generational shifts. We talked about Salesforce, obviously using that. There was a whole concept of cloud computing, and you could all of a sudden you don't have to have your own servers. It's a mind-boggling change. And obviously, coming to today, you've got all these LLMs that can really expedite and increase efficiency significantly.
Yeah. Where do you go to for inspiration these days? Do you have blogs, podcasts, communities, chat groups?
I invest. So talking to young founders, seed, pre-seed, is something that's always exciting. I think it's a hit or miss, I'll be honest, because in many cases you're like, okay, you've got this great idea, but you have absolutely no idea how to build a business. Alternatively, it's the other way around. But that generally does help. And honestly, listening to podcasts and reading a lot, whether it's research reports, so many research reports, or some of these podcasts. Maybe not so much one about an exit, but more about a new piece of technology.
Other learnings or advice you'd have for founders who are kind of navigating a volatile situation, trying to do rounds but then hitting a funding winner, or just controlling their own destiny. Another question is like, how do you keep the energy going? You're now close to 7 years in at this point, and avoid burnout?
The burnout question, it's really hard, especially when your team is partially, you've got, in our case, 40% of our team is outside of New York. And even in New York, we don't work on a daily basis. Well, the team doesn't come in on a daily basis. I really think it's individual just to a large extent. One is we do have a very flexible PTO policy that we're proceeding in with our parent company as well. Keeping the culture is very important. So being able to make sure that when people need time off, whether it's a day, whether in the middle of the week, if it comes down to it, or taking a month off even, that's something that we have to be able to understand and accept, because most of our team has been working in our company for well over 2-3 years. It's not bad for a 7-year-old company. So that is one thing. I will point out that the excitement of building new products and the social impact, because we are very transparent, does give a buzz for the team, and that does help. But I think overall, with the exception of truly taking time off, over a period of 5-7 years, it is hard.
Yeah, it is important to create those blocks, but it's hard to create those super early on in the company's life.
Yeah.
Although I've heard some people say if you do it later on, it actually empowers your team, and then you find it can be a growth moment for the entire organization if you do step away, even just for a week or two for the first time, if you've literally never done that.
Yeah, I mean, we encourage people in our team to take at least 2 weeks consecutively off. I mean, obviously, the problem is the idea is to lead by example, and I try to do 2 weeks off without a phone, which is really, really important and unfortunately hard. But I mean, I think every now and then we have some one-off events, like banks go under, which is never a good thing. But yeah, I think the ability to not look at your phone, and if you can truly disconnect, really helps, but it doesn't solve the deeper underlying problem of true burnout. These are all multiple things you can do to avoid it. It's not, I don't believe it's just one thing.
Yeah. And what's energizing you now? You're now part of the acquirer, working on new products. There's some strategic overlap. What are the things you're focused on?
So there's a few things. Again, one of the main reasons we wanted to do this was because the customer aligned, and we actually like the people a lot. If I didn't enjoy the CFO or the CEO, this would not be a conversation worth having, because it has to truly align. So keeping aside the fact that most of the things in our company stay the same, which is nobody has a change in reporting structure. We continue to build the same products that, again, aligned to our parent company, all works out well. The one thing that does change is I get a boss, which is, it's going to be an experience for sure. But what really does keep us energized, again, is to be able to say, hey, we're at 150 million plus in revenue today. How do we get that to 300? How do we move that with our parent company's help to $1 billion, right? That truly energizes us, because remember, it's all about growth and the social impact. Doing that and being able to spend less time, at least for myself, on things like finance and more business as usual, and focusing on things that most of our team loves, which is building new product that has the biggest impact to society, that really gets us energized. And that is one of the main reasons why we even considered the acquisition. Yep.
Are there new products you're particularly excited about at the moment that
there
you can
is
talk
one
to?
That I'm super excited about. Unfortunately, I can't talk about it just yet. I mean, the best thing that I could say is the way we think about products is the following. We only focus on the same customer segment that we've talked about. We leverage our core learnings, and our core infrastructure that we've built, which is cash flow-based underwriting, cash flow-based prediction, and being able to solve for this deepest pain point of financial stress. Again, I'm not giving too much away, but being able to leverage that same user base, the same stack, is what we're doing next. All I'll say is BNPL, watch out.
I will say one thing I'm excited about in the ecosystem right now is I see a lot of innovation at the pre-seed and seed, but now you have a bunch of late-stage startups that have been acquired or gone public. And some of those can keep growing at scale and are going to make big bets about how do we take this company from north of 100 to north of $1 billion. We've got some good size outcomes, Stripe's, 80 billion-ish, but JP Morgan, Visa, each 500 billion. Like, we need to build some really massive companies, and it's going to take some aggressive experimentation at scale. And I think we're going to start to see people take those swings.
Well, I mean, there's a few things on that, right? As I was thinking about my own journey, in fact, I was having this conversation with a VC. I think what's happened. Look, I'm going to do something again. For example, right? I have a chip on my shoulder. It needs to be bigger. It needs to be better. And the difference is,
careful. You can get a bunch of cold inbound from VC associates now.
I'll give you a call, Rex, if you're interested. And the timing's obviously not right now. There's 2 years of minimum that I'm going to spend with the company, make sure the team's in the right place, and do the stuff that's driving me to the reason why we did this deal. Again, it's just, I do want to see this double, triple and be able to build the next two products at the very least over the next 2 years. But there's so many mistakes even in this conversation that I've talked about, so many, right? How would you do this again? And I think about a couple of companies I know, which is obviously the RAM founders in Eric. The second time around was just bigger and I would argue better. You can say the same thing of one of my investments at Deutsche Bank. It's a company called Copal Partners, which is now Oak North in the UK. Being able to do it ideally with the same team, bigger and better, multiple things happen. One is you know your mistakes. The other thing is you know who to call and makes life a little bit easier. And the third thing is, at least for me, you can really take much bigger swings. You're no longer worried about protecting what you've built. You can just really, really go bigger. So those are some of the things that in chapter 2, whenever that is, I'm excited about.
I mean, that's another great point. So not only do you have, companies experimenting at scale, taking bigger swings, but the founders who have, built some pretty impressive businesses, when they come back and they try and build the next one, they're like, fuck it, I'm going even bigger this time because that's all that I'm interested in. And that's exciting. It's just having that degree of ambition.
Yeah, just taking the biggest possible swings. And, you've obviously done a whole bunch of interviews on LLMs and AI. I hate using that phrase, but I think it's justified today. There's so much to be done. I mean, I think a lot of the companies will eventually, no pun intended, will blow up to a large degree. But the more and more you can learn and truly automate, and AI is just difficult in finance. I mean, let's be honest here. There's a whole bunch of compliance in there, so you need to be careful. We've been integrating AI to reasonably methodically in our company. Could definitely do it faster. But let's
go there and talk about what use cases you found today versus what you think might be things you would leverage in the future.
Sure. So what we're doing today, again, so the goal is to automate as much as possible in our company and give the user the best experience. So we've done a whole bunch of that already. But specifically related to AI, the easy thing is on the chatbots, being able to give responses faster to our custom base whenever they're having any issues. That has started to work reasonably, if not exceedingly well. And I think that'll just take on a whole different level as we get into 2025. Again, just making sure you don't mess up when you're answering these questions is something very, very important in healthcare or finance, anything that's generally regulated. We use it a lot to test our code. That's something that's in the last 6-9 months, I'm not sure if Hamel talked about that, but that fundamentally helps expedite overall code delivery and able to launch new versions faster. Marketing, it's been fundamentally helpful for creating content. And part of our core proposition is to deliver the right financial tip at the right time. So for example, if we see your electricity bill is too high because we see the cash flow information, we'll send you a piece of content saying, hey, this is what you could do. Part of that now is starting to be generated by AI. So still very much, very, very focused on being compliant. Human person checks it, but just expedites the speed and the quantum of what we can do. And then as while we're doing that, we are experimenting with a interface for individuals to be able to look and understand their finances. That's where we stand for the most part today. Yep,
makes sense. And big goals for 2025, New Year resolutions?
Have more fun with the team. Have more impact. I mean, it's kind of boring, but that's really it, right? I mean, you talked about making sure you don't have too much burnout. Like, again, there's so many things we need to do to try to make a better experience for even our team. But it's really launching the new product that I talked about, being able to continue to grow and make sure we integrate as effectively as we can, especially being able to cross-sell our users to build a cohesive whole between ourselves and our parent company.
Yep. Well, thanks so much for coming on. It's been awesome. It's great to hear the story of how, took Brigit from where it is to where it is today to inside of Upbound and all of that. And I'll be looking forward to tracking you guys post-acquisition and then, who knows, 2 years, whatever might come next, what that big swing is.
Appreciate it.